I didn't know that the first billets to go off in the dome were National Guard fired. I have since seen the concession stands the guards were defending from the masses of evacuees reaching for food. I have since met with folks who survived the shelter afforded them. Within a week of Katrina hitting, my friends and I had organized an event in New York City called Refugees for Refugees. Alwan, an Arab American arts organization, donated their space. Every friend I know who was an artist and who was in town donated their time and talent. People gave what they had, and my friend Kathy and I were able to bring some much needed cash down to several organizations. I did not give any money to the Red Cross. Vitamins, maxi pads, clothes for children. My bags were packed as though I was going to Palestine. I kept thinking about this use and abuse of the word refugee. The poem on refuge and language is an engagement with these ideas. I wrote it before I got on the plane to see for myself. Poets are often held to loftier ideals of witness, and I knew, though I was writing the truth, that I needed to go there myself in order to validate the poem as a thing more than mere propaganda. On refuge and language, I do not wish to place words in living mouths or bury the dead dishonorably. I am not cry, I am not deaf to cries escaping shelters that citizens are not refugees. Refugees are not Americans. I will not use language one way or another to accommodate my comfort. I will not look away. All I know is this: no peoples ever choose to claim status of dispossessed. No peoples want pity above compassion. No enslaved peoples ever called themselves slaves. What do we pledge allegiance to? A government that leaves its old to die of thirst surrounded by water is a foreign government. People who are streaming illiterate into paperwork have long ago been abandoned. I think of coded language and all that words carry on their backs. I think of how it is always the poor who are tagged and boxed with labels not of their own choosing. I think of my grandparents and how some call them refugees, others call them non-existent. They call themselves landless, which means homeless. Before the hurricane, no tents were prepared for the fleeing because Americans do not live in tents. Tents are for Haiti, for Rwanda, for Bosnia. Refugees are the rest of the world, those left to defend their human decency against conditions the rich keep their animals from, those who have too many children, those who always have open hands and empty bellies, those whose numbers are massive, those who seek refuge from nature's currents and man's resources, those who are forgotten in the mean times, those who remember. Ahmad from Guinea makes my falafel sandwich and says, "So, this is your country?" Yes, Amadou. This, my country, and these, my people, evacuated as if criminal, rescued by neighbors, shot by soldiers, adamant they belong. The rest of the world can now see what I have seen. The rest of the world lives here too, in America. So what does social justice mean in the third world? What does it mean in the 9th ward? If I hadn't been to New Orleans a few days ago, you might be getting a more linear good morning from me. But I've just come from there, more than 2 years after the hurricane, and it's on my mind. Before I tell you a little bit about my trip then, I want to make the space for you to hear about going to New Orleans right after the flood. September 16, 2005, I entered the River Center shelter in Baton Rouge. If I ever forget what I have seen, I do not know if I will be a blessed or a cursed woman. I begin with what I brought with me: loot, clothes, money, napkins, poetry books, nail polish, vitamins, hope. I bought a pretty pair of pajamas, those I left in Baton Rouge. I brought with me an innocence I didn't even know I possessed until I left it in the toxic, ravined streets of New Orleans. My homegirl and I got into New Orleans Orleans yesterday with a fake press pass. She was white and used her privilege. She had her camera, and I drove the car. Mind you, I don't have a license. The only time I've driven a car in like several years was in New Orleans after Katrina. Shows you the lawlessness that was going around. My friend has never been to the Crescent City. She will never see what it was. The mayor's press conference announced this is the first time in the history of the city that it has been drug and crime free. Beware, he said, those of you planning on returning to do no good. The city has police. Even the police have invested in protecting property. Army, National Guard, M16s, M4s, night vision, and even bazookas, he chuckled, for the special people. The smell in New Orleans is not human. Though humanity did manufacture the chemicals and structures that have dissolved into nature to create it, this is not natural. The streets are peppered with so many military vehicles, it appears a film. The Ninth Ward, which has been drained of its flood, is empty of its people and heavy with menacing air. The cars that had been underwater are parked, salted. I drove the streets I'd walked down and knew what hell would look like, what it would smell like. Hell is not just fire, it is water as well. It will take me moons and cycles to begin to craft the language I need to transform these words and myself into something more than a simple reflection. I am a poet. I enter through an exit. I brought with me my ancestry and knowledge that displacement happens eternally and externally, within countries, within bodies. The River Center has several shelters within it. The one I entered did not allow cameras. Actually, we weren't allowed in at all. The only people allowed in, actually this is for real, was the Church of Scientology people. They were wearing orange jumpsuits like the Guantanamo guys. Don't know what that was about. Did not see Tom Cruise, but looked for him. We weren't allowed in. We said we were pressed, still not allowed in. An evacuee outside watching a TV setup said, just go inside. You don't really need a wristband. Just tell them you live here. The lights are bright, the noise a constant din. A loudspeaker announces things no one understands. There are women who are trading what they have for extra food and blankets. I am a poet, I said to the Haitian woman folding and refolding her clothes. A classmate had molested her 8-year-old daughter on the school bus earlier in the day. I asked the pretty brown girl with 6 braids booming out of her head if she screamed. I don't know how to scream, she said. A woman has to know how to scream. Her mother nodded. A Red Cross worker came over to our huddle. The boy who wouldn't stop touching the girl would be put on a different bus. He and his family are still in the same shelter. What is your name again? She asked the mother. I told you my name so many times, she gritted in Creole. Mrs. and Mr. Brown never thought they would be in a shelter. He is 82 years old. She gently warns him not to say her age, then says she's just a few years behind him. Black don't crack and brown don't frown, I say to them. Her laugh is a surprise. I was born and reared in New Orleans, she says. I left my car parked in the street. I thought I'd be back. Her home of 37 years is in Mid-City. I never thought I'd be in a shelter. Trina is scrubbing her white sneakers, her hair half braided, her lip gloss thick. When I asked her if I could sit down, she finally tracked down her 2 children last week. Girl, I'm fine now.